Good morning and welcome to Plain Speaking, which is a program dedicated to espousing and supporting and encouraging the Democratic platform, the Democratic ideals. And of course, as you all know, the Democrats are the party of the people, and we try to keep giving you the information that you need to continue to be a proponent of the democratic process. I'm Frank Rosenhoover, your moderator, and to my far left, and I love that word, left, and to my far left is Tom Patterson, who is one of our technology geeks now, and he's been helping us get some things up on YouTube and things of that sort. And to my immediate right is the state committee member and vice chair of the party in Blair County, Aurandt. And to my immediate left is George Thompson, who is our treasurer, as well as one of our research deans, and has come to these meetings. And in fact, he has to have two people help bring the stuff into the studio. But nonetheless, we're prepared today to give you a broad expansion to the topics that are impacting your lives. And we want you to know that the political party that has your interests at heart every day is the Democratic Party. And we're going to start off by talking about the favorite topic, and that is taxes and taxation. And I say before I ask George to start, we all have to understand that the only form of revenue that government has is taxes. And if we aren't willing to pay for what we want and need, then we have to suffer. And that's all there is to it. And now maybe we can allocate better and maybe account better, but we need taxes. So, George, tell us about this very pleasant topic.
Well, right. As a treasurer here, numbers are my thing, and of course, we're just ending the April 15th tax season, so I thought it might be somewhat appropriate to talk a little bit about taxes. And it's not obvious how much people actually know about taxes. I think many people don't actually do their taxes. They have other people doing the taxes under the belief that it's very complicated. Well, it can get complicated, but I do believe for most people they should just sit down and try to do their own taxes. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into specific rules and regulations, how to shelter your income. We'll let the Republicans maybe talk about how to shelter your income.
Yeah, I have hardly enough to live on, let alone shelter it.
But I wanted to give sort of like an overview of both the federal government and the state government of, first of all, where the money goes. Because like you say, you pay taxes, no one likes to do it, but you get benefits from the government. And you know, in the federal government, most of the federal money actually comes back to you in the form of Social Security, Medicare, subsidies now for the Obamacare health plans. It also comes back to you in different safety net programs. In fact, over 75% of the expenditures of the federal government actually come back to the people in the form of social programs. Now, I know some people disagree with that. They feel they don't really get much back in return, and we're subsidizing people that were better spent to go out and get their own jobs. I mean, I'm not really going to talk about that part, but for many people, Medicare and Social Security, I think, are popular. So
yes, and important.
Yeah. And it is important. And this latest economic downturn actually that stabilized the economic situation, the Medicare, the Social Security, and made it different from back in the Great Depression when none of those programs existed and everything just was a free fall.
Yeah. And you'd have people starving in the streets. We would be like a third world country without those safety nets.
Yeah, and so in any case, that's where the money goes. Now, as far as how the federal government raises its money, I'm going to have to flip papers here. You know, unfortunately, all these things are there's so much information that I can't commit everything to memory, but I can say that in the case of the federal government, most of the money does come in the form of personal income tax. And There's, of course, a whole series of sheltering things. Sometimes they're called tax expenditures, and sometimes the tax expenditures actually are hard to get rid of. Everyone loves the ability to deduct their mortgage interest when they itemize their tax return. And then, you have to understand, though, that when people itemize their tax return, typically you're talking about higher income people. Most lower income people can take a standard deduction. And so to them, the ability to deduct the interest you pay on your mortgage is meaningless because they don't even get into the use of that.
Right, and even if you want to deduct for charitable contributions, you have to have a very significant percentage of your income that you give to charities before you can qualify for a deduction.
Oh, right. And usually the higher income person to begin with is in a higher tax bracket, which is another concept that people maybe are vaguely familiar with, but the more income you make, the higher the percentage that you pay to the federal government on that higher income. And so an ability to reduce that income is more meaningful to you because you're having your income withheld at the higher level at 35%, let's say. If you're lower income, you don't exceed 5% or sometimes 15% for many people. And so if they have the same deduction, they're only getting a 15% reduction in their taxes because that's all they pay.
Now, I'm sorry.
I also think that people look at what the federal government takes out of their checks weekly or biweekly, and does not take into account what their refund is at the end of the year. They're just thinking, I'm paying all this money every week to the government and I'm not getting anything. And that's where a lot of the anger comes from. They're not taking into account that they're getting a refund back at the end of the year. They're not really paying all that.
And one thing about when you talk about the more money you make, you have a little higher percentage to pay, except when you get into the super rich who then have deductions that they are able to use for certain types of investments, and also if you have every penny that the super rich take in a year is not counted as income. Sometimes a lot of the money they get from the hedge funds that they're involved in, the transfers of money, that's not declared as income, it's declared as an asset, and you get protections for that. So when you get up into the top 1%, they may end up paying less than the 35% that you and I pay.
Like Warren Buffett paid 15%.
Yeah, because
and that's based on the dividends that you get paid as opposed to interest. Dividends you get paid. It had been 15% cap. It went to 20% this year, but it's still lower. And just so people understand that if you're higher income, a large portion of your actual income is dividends, or the other thing is capital gains. And capital gains is also taxed at a lower rate. So the higher income people, they end up, because so much of their income is either capital gains or dividends, they end up paying a low percentage. Now, the tax they pay is high because their income is high, but as a percentage, it's actually low. And let's not forget that everyone, there's different people, you always hear the people say, well, these people don't pay any taxes. Well, now that's not true, because if you work, people pay Social Security, into Social Security.
And wage tax.
The wage tax.
Sales tax.
Right, well, and we're talking now about actually the sales tax. So the federal government sort of stayed out of that. Other countries do have a sales tax,
a national,
but here in the United States, it's pretty much restricted to states and local governments getting tax money. And let's just switch a little bit from the federal government. Well, before we switch from the federal government, you had made the statement before we got on the program that actually United States doesn't tax people as much as other countries, and that's absolutely true. I don't have it's buried in all these papers, but
I think we're like about 15th in the world when it comes to the percentage of our income and everything that's taxed, and we're about 15th in the world. And you look at places like Denmark and Sweden and countries like that are more socialistic.
Yeah, they have large social nets. They're also happier. They have more taxes and happy to pay them because they view it as a benefit.
They don't have a right-wing megaphone in their ear every day saying, taxes are bad, you're overtaxed, you're overtaxed.
And they value education. They have stellar educational results in these countries. Actually, public transportation is great in many of these countries. In fact, most of them. There's a lot of benefits coming from the government in other in other parts of the world. Over here, we like to privatize everything.
Yeah. Well, I was just reading again the other day, when it comes to the benefits to the people, most countries around in the industrial sector guarantee so many weeks vacation. They guarantee maternity leave and family leave for everybody, because it's a government-controlled process. In America, every time the workers want time off for family illness or so on, right away you're destroying our economic base and everything. Whereas in all these other countries, where the tax is a little higher, and that the industries get subsidies to help pay for longer vacations and all that thing. In America, for some reason, they resent workers getting benefits.
Yeah, it's all the greed factor.
Well, in many countries, for example, higher education is free. You have a test you need to take to get into the university, but once you pass the test, the university's free. I mean, that's a benefit. Over here, people are going into debt. That's one of the largest increasing things in the United States is student loans.
Before you say your comment, I just saw something in Huffington Post or something yesterday. The federal government is going to this year make $160 billion in interest on these student loans. Now that's criminal. That
is.
Here these kids are sacrificing, and I know some personally some people who are spending, and they have to do it by law, and they're struggling, and yet the government is getting $160 billion in interest. Why don't they forgive that to these people?
Well, I think they're being forced to forgive some of it because I think the default rate on a lot of these loans actually is high. That's actually an issue right now. Some of the schools seem to have their students that go attend their schools, they don't repay their federal debt. And it's an issue now with and a lot of them are actually these charter universities, these internet universities, where the question is, well, should the government keep giving money to people to attend these universities if they graduate, or actually what happens, they don't graduate, they just attend, rack up the bills, and they never get around to graduating, or even if they do graduate, they can't get a good job to repay.
Well, there are statistics that show that upwards to 50% of all young folks who start college, a 4-year degree, never finish. So if they are taking student loans and they never finish their education, yet they've got to pay them back, and are they getting into the kind of jobs that they thought they were going to be trained for in colleges? Now, I know, George, we don't want to take away from your time here. You want to talk about the...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fine. We could talk about the state and where the state actually gets its money, and most of the state's money comes from personal income tax. Everyone's familiar with that. About 39% of Pennsylvania's income comes from personal income tax. 32%, it's almost equal, comes from sales tax here in Pennsylvania. Now the corporate taxes is 17% of the revenue that Pennsylvania gets in taxes comes from the corporate tax, and then there's things like inheritance tax, 3%. Other taxes, and I'm not clear what they mean by other taxes, but perhaps it's the Marcellus Shale.
Yeah, or even like the personal, everybody pays in a lot of cities a a $5 or $7 tax for. Of course, that goes to the city.
That goes to the municipality.
Yeah, you're talking statewide,
well, it could be gasoline tax,
gasoline,
for
cigarettes,
example.
alcohol.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all those things are.
Room, when you go to
you go to the
stay at a
motel
room
tax.
and all.
Yeah, real estate, realty transfer tax is 1%. They happen to break that out, but that's where generally Pennsylvania gets its money, from those particular taxes. Now, the claim is always made that, boy, we're really taxed here in Pennsylvania. Not true. I encourage everyone to go to actually a website, the Independent Fiscal Office, ifo.state.pa.us. That's the web address you get to, and then it has different links for a variety of things, among which is this argument I hear different times that if we raise this Marcellus Shale tax, well, they're going to leave Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no,
Where are they going to go?
you know.
We have the most.
well, we have the most gas and we have the least taxes.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Independent Fiscal Office has a study that they've published, and actually the closest low tax state is Ohio as far as low taxes. Texas, actually, we would have to increase our taxes quite a bit to match what Texas gets from the extraction of natural gas and their shale thing. But anyway, generally, if you go to that Independent Fiscal Office, there's a report they pull up that is very interesting. It compares Pennsylvania's taxes to all the other states. And we're very low. In personal income tax, we're 18th. The highest state tax, by the way, is at 4.52%, because they have a graduated income tax in New York. And here in Pennsylvania, I mean, our official tax rate is 23, I think, percent.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was 3.2.
But because we also have exemptions built into the tax law, Pennsylvania ends up taxing on average 2.58%.
Okay, I thought it was 2.6.
It's about 18th in the highest income tax. There are some that have no income tax.
New Jersey doesn't, do they?
Wyoming, Washington, Texas, South Dakota, Nevada, Florida, and Alaska have no income tax. But they get their money elsewhere. On the corporate tax. Now, we said here in Pennsylvania 17% of the tax revenue comes from corporate. We're actually 11th in corporate income tax. Now, I want to remind you that that's one of the favorite things the Republicans say. Well, we're the highest in corporate income tax at 9.99%. Of course, they fail to say that Pennsylvania has all these loopholes that allow the corporation not to pay on their true income.
70% of all.
Well, yeah, 70%
of all businesses.
Yeah, they don't pay any corporate tax because they always report a loss, which brings up one of the ways that the corporation can report a loss is they take things like patents and they ship the patents to Delaware. Then the Pennsylvania corporation, they're all the same. I mean, the patent actually belongs to the corporation in most people's mind, but they make an artificial division. They say, well, the patent part, that's in Delaware. And the reason they do Delaware is because it's a low-tax state. Now, the funny thing is, even though Delaware, I'm regressing a little bit, so what they do for Pennsylvania, they pay the Delaware corporation like a high fee for the right to use this patent. And so the income actually goes to Delaware, even though it's really a Pennsildania corporation. And so the Pennsylvania income is less, so they don't end up paying the high rate, the 9.99%. Now, the funny thing is, in this tax comparison, Delaware, even though it has a low corporate income rate, it actually is number one in getting money from corporations. And when I say number one, they are basing it on the total income of the state. That's the way this Independent Fiscal Office analyzed the thing. They looked at the total gross domestic product of the state, and then they looked at the amount of money they get from corporate taxes, and Delaware gets more money than any state on corporate taxes, because not only in Pennsylvania but other states, corporations are all trying to shift their income back to Delaware.
They don't have the companies and everything in Delaware, but they incorporate it. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, George will give us his wrap-up on how we should be happy to pay taxes, because after all, it makes us free, healthy, satisfied, hopefully. We'll take our break here.
Operation Our Town is reaching out into our community every day, helping groups like the Gloria Gates Foundation. They received a grant in 2009 from Operation Our Town to help fund their program, which was established more than 10 years ago.
We now have children who've gone through our program and are out of high school, and they're young adults. And they're coming back and they're telling us the impact our after-school program had on them. So we know that we are reaching the kids.
The Gloria Gates Foundation prides itself on teaching the children lessons that will stay with them throughout their life. Operation Our Town, creating community-minded citizens for a better tomorrow.
Okay, welcome back. We are trying to inform our viewers that paying taxes, it may seem onerous at times, but when we take a look at what we get and how we compare it to other countries and how Pennsylvania compares to other states, those of us in Pennsylvania can be grateful that we don't pay the amount of money that other states have to in order to try to provide the same services. And we talk a lot about income tax. George is going to spend a couple of minutes on sales tax, and then we're going to move into a couple other areas.
Well, sales tax, property tax is another big tax in Pennsylvania. By the way, Pennsylvania ranks very low on what they charge people for sales tax, and one of the reasons is we exempt so many products here in Pennsylvania from sales tax. You go to many states, clothes, food.
And when we go to Texas and to New York, we're constantly paying. In New Jersey, it's the same thing.
So actually, in sales tax, we're low. We're 37th in the least tax state. The highest tax state is Hawaii. They get a lot of their money from sales tax in Hawaii. Property tax, we're low. Now, property tax, of course, people are really complaining about right now here in Blair County because of the reassessment. But actually in Pennsylvania, compared to other states, we don't collect a lot of money in property taxes. So we may complain, but you better not want to live in New Jersey. Apparently, New Jersey, New Hampshire, they collect a whole lot of money in this area of sales tax. And I was saying there's other taxes, gaming, liquor. Pennsylvania actually gets quite a bit of its money in that category compared to other states. It's not that it's a high amount percentage-wise, but compared to other states, West Virginia gets most, is the highest revenue producer in that area of gaming, liquor. They have the casinos down there. Alaska, it's a dramatic difference in the comparison of different states in a category called all other taxes, and wasn't sure what that is. And it's, as it turns out, it's an area where it's the Marcellus Shale type of tax. Alaska gets 18%, or no, I should say, it gets of the
total
gross domestic product. 18% of the tax comes from that area of natural resources. Pennsylvania is 1%. But and the way you get your taxes makes a difference. In the case of property taxes, funding the schools, for example, Governor Corbett has decided that Pennsylvania should pay less to the local schools. Now, Pennsylvania generally gets its money from income, so if Pennsylvania pays for this education, it's more of an income tax. But by shifting the money away from Pennsylvania back to the local community, the local community only can get its money from property taxes.
That's right.
So then, naturally, you're going to have people hit harder in the property tax area.
Yeah.
So where you get your money makes a difference. How these things are set up as far as exemptions, loopholes, that makes a difference.
And I think what we can conclude here, because we could, like George says, we could spend days on it, but I think we have to put it in perspective. The only form of revenue government has is taxation. And when you compare, and we ought to encourage the viewers, just don't say we're being taxed to death. Take a look at, get on IFO. .state.pa.us and find out how we compare to other people, because we are not being taxed more than a lot of other people are, and we ought to just enjoy what we get, and instead of being, upset and angry about it. If you don't want good roads, if you don't want good education, if you don't want good research and development, then of course don't pay taxes, and then we'll go back to the days when we have a jackass and a sled to get around. And so the point is, folks, taxes have unfortunately become the whipping boy of politics. And all these people who run for office and say we're not going to raise taxes, just like our county commissioners today, or two of them at least. We're not going to raise taxes. Well, they've been raising taxes. And to me that is disingenuous. It's being untruthful to the voters. Everybody knows you've got to continue to raise taxes because everything we consume goes up every year. So, George, I know you have probably enough
I
for
got
another.
plenty of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a boring subject, but I get frustrated because I do hear these misstatements out there. We're the highest tax country or the state. I mean, it's not true at all.
And that's one thing about, I always tell people when I pull out the iPhone, if you have an iPhone or any other form of getting information instantly, you can just type in what percentage of taxation does Pennsylvania pay in relation to the other states in the Union. Lo and behold, it'll come up. So there's no reason that we should be saying things that we don't know the answers to. And people get out there and just pontificate and complain and raise the devil, and in reality we are not as bad off in the form of taxation as people like to think we are. Robin, what's your topic here?
I actually did some research on McCutcheon v. FEC.
And that is the law, the decision that says what?
Well, it impacts the aggregate limits that individual can make to a candidate, the National Party, and certain political committees. For the 2013-2014 election cycle, individuals can give $123,200 to candidates, national parties, and certain political committees. That includes a $48,600 limit on what individuals can give to a candidate. Other limits include a $2,600 limit on what individuals can give to a specific candidate for federal office per election cycle. McCutcheon v. FEC is going to change that, and it's a point to remember that because of changes to the Federal Election Campaign Act in 1974 and created the FEC, the body that oversees and enforces campaign finance regulation, it was amended in the wake of the Watergate scandal. So these rules were in place for a reason, because something bad happened. It all comes down to, and even Justice Roberts conceded that money buys gratitude. So when you can up your aggregate limits, it's going to buy you more favor, more access to our leaders. And I mean, does money buy speech?
Yeah, well, Tom's going to be talking about that in a minute, but I do want to just mention one thing about the aggregate, because sometimes people don't quite understand the aggregate. There is a limit that you can give to a person, but now the Supreme Court in McCutcheon says, well, if you decide not to just give it to a person, but you want to give it to the party or to a group or to a PAC, then you can be giving untold amounts of money. Now, nobody sitting at this table that I know of can afford an aggregate of $120,000.
Whenever, I mean, many families are struggling to put food on the table or worry about their heating bills, or, you know, so you can't buy influence in Congress. So it really leads us that the rich are buying the influence and the rest of us are kind of forgotten.
Well, and the thing that I object to strenuously, not only is this massive amounts of money people can contribute, but so many of the people contribute it, and they do it to a PAC, a non-profit organization that, you know, which brings up this IRA thing, or IRS thing about whether these organizations are actually non-profits or political. But in any case, you don't know when they do it that way. You don't know who's behind the non-profit that's putting on these political ads.
So there's already loopholes that they can give as much money as they want, but yet they have to go and attack other, you know what I mean, the other limits that are put in place for a reason.
The thing I brought up a few times on this was this campaign against Mark Kritz by Keith Rothis.
Yeah.
In that congressional district in Cambridge County, extending down into Washington County. It's that large,
that's right, they expanded
former John Murtha's district congressional
well
district.
Expanded.
You know, they kept showing a picture on the TV with Barack Obama knowingly unpopular in that section of Pennsylvania with Mark Kritz. Yeah. And Mark Kritz is not one of us.
Yeah.
That's the message. Saw it probably 50 times. After a while, I DVR a lot of things. I just would go right by it. But anyway, who was behind that ad?
Yeah.
Young Guns. So I took the time to try to find out, well, who is this organization, Young Guns? And basically it was Sheldon Adelson, who is sitting down in Las Vegas. He's a casino.
Because he's one of us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the contradiction there, you know, accusing Mark Kritz of not being one of us, you know, he's like leaning with Barack Obama, and it's run by this casino operator in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Do people understand that?
Yeah.
Well, even John McGinnis here locally, when he ran the first time against Geist, he was funded significantly by Students First, which is another one of these PACs that is funded by these super wealthy people who don't even live in Pennsylvania, and they're pouring money into Pennsylvania to get a guy like McGinnis elected.
To buy our public education system.
The whole thing.
Well, and people don't realize is campaigning is no longer a political issue. It's big business.
Yeah,
you have media people, you have researchers, you have the campaign themselves. The politician relies heavily on what people are digging up for him. Yeah, he has very little into it. It's who wants to get him into office accounts.
Yeah. And you know, when you talk about these decisions that are being made, and I was chatting with my wife this morning before I came in, and I was talking about topics, and she said, well, you know, why don't you mention something about gerrymandering? Because a lot of people don't understand what gerrymandering is, and it's nothing more than
manipulating
the boundaries of the legislative and senatorial districts. And it's done by the state legislators based upon the census figures in the years with tens, like in 2010. The Pennsylvania legislature, the General Assembly, was able to redefine the limits of these districts, and of course in Blair County we lost, you know, part of Jerry Fleck no longer is in, Mike Fleck is involved with us. But gerrymandering is what happens when the politicians in charge of a state legislature can change the boundaries, and you mentioned about Kritz's and Murtha's. And so the only chance we have of changing that is every 10 years when we get a chance to get enough Democrats in the state house.
And how many Democrats are in the state legislature, the judiciary? It's Republican stacked.
Right, and it's done. We did control the General Assembly of Pennsylvania up until 2010. We had a 5 or 7 member advantage. We lost 17 seats in that election.
Yeah.
And so therefore the Republicans gerrymandered. Yeah. And so we have no choice when it comes to who can we put in to decide cases like how do we fund public campaigns.
It's also curious to note that Mitch McConnell was there at the hearing, and he and his attorney argued for no limits. And why is this guy in office? Seriously.
Well, yeah, he's in a serious competitive race right now, and I think people in Kentucky are asking that. But the other angle on this thing, there's criteria that countries are rated concerning their economic competitiveness.
Right.
And one of the elements of the rating is corruption. Now, in many countries, it's well known that if you want to get permits done, in fact, I think Citibank just got into a problem in Mexico. Or maybe it was Walmart got into a problem in Mexico.
Yeah, I think it was
also. They couldn't get their stores built down there unless they would pay bribes to the local officials. Well, actually, we don't really refer to these campaign contributions as bribes,
but in essence, that's what they are.
Well, and this one place that ranks countries
when you're
has our corruption index going up in the United States.
Well, you see,
they view it as you got to buy political influence.
And Tom's going to mention this very shortly here. The question has always been, does the average citizen or a group of average citizens have any impact on the decisions made by the people who are elected to run the government? And Tom, what did you find out?
Well, two things. There was an article in PBS NewsHour that said about outside spending at a record-breaking pace. In the 2014 election cycle, which hasn't even gotten to the first primary, outside groups have already spent $56 million. And that's already half of what they spent in the total election cycle in 2010. A quarter of that's been spent on the 6 Senate races that are up for bid. And, the outside spending is just going through the roof. And now that the rules have changed that they can give to as many candidates as they want, this is just going to get worse. You're not going to be able to turn on the TV or radio or anything without somebody's ad running in your ears. But what was interesting was they looked at, there were 2 students, one from Princeton University and one from Northwestern. They looked at the effect of special interest groups, elitists, and the common citizen on policies that went through Congress. And they looked at 1,779 issues. And they found out that if you break it down into the lobbyist groups and special interest groups and rich people and rich corporations, the American public in the last 1,779 issues had little to no influence in the decisions. And the biggest bulk of it come down to wealthy corporations and wealthy big lobbyists like your NRA, and so the American public, these 2 people surveyed citizens, and they asked them a set of questions, and they found out overwhelmingly nobody feels they have a voice in Washington anymore, that money buys speech is what it comes down to.
Well, and I think that is very significant when you take a look at what kind of public surveys that are coming out that say people in America overwhelmingly support like gay marriage or background checks for people who buy guns and everything. And even during the Iraq War, when 70 to 75% of the American people said, stop this war, and yet did those things happen? No, because, and there was an article last night on one of the shows in which they talked about this whole issue, and they did the same kind of thing that Tom's talking about. Studies have shown that the voice of the citizens has no meaning. Since 1990, the number of lobbyists has increased from less than 1,000 to almost 20,000 now. Lobbyists. Every single special interest group has a lobbyist.
So what point does it stop being a democracy?
Well, we've got to...
Well, it's sad.
It's democracy to the highest
bidder. This cynicism is reflected in the voter turnout.
That's right, and they say...
very few people... I was just watching a program, Charlie Rose, and he was interviewing this fellow from Afghanistan, and they just, of course, had their elections in Afghanistan, and they had about a 60% turnout in the Afghanistan election. Yeah. And this, you got to understand, was under threat of death.
They could die.
The Taliban was trying to blow people up that were exercising their voting
Right.
rights, and you still had 60% of the citizens out in Afghanistan voting. Here in the United States, we rarely crack 50%.
Yeah.
I mean, and that would be a presidential election that's hotly competitive.
Well, especially when you have a black man running.
Well, right. I mean, that actually drew voters out, I think, because you had some people supporting him that came out to vote, and then the people opposed to him came out to vote.
Well, and here's another thing that they went on to about the Koch brothers. They're spending money now in local elections. Wisconsin, Ohio.
School boards, city
boards,
councils.
yeah.
What difference does it make to them who in Blair County would elect a school board in Roaring Spring?
Right.
But yet these are the kind of venues that these people are putting money in.
Yeah.
But
And they are there to...
Are they looking for their next star?
Well, they're pushing their political agenda.
But
Well,
That's the
starting
whole thing.
grassroots to me means that's where the Koch brothers plant the seeds.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got to take another break. We want to do this so we honor our sponsors, too. And among the four of us sitting here, we've all been sponsors, and I'm grateful for that. And we'll be continuing after this break.
My Jamie, she was my baby girl, a precious baby girl. When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risk for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. What I would say to mothers that allow their daughters to tan, no mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery. One person an hour dies from melanoma. Jamie's hour was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, March 16th, 2007. I hope no one else has to mark their hour.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Savings Man here with a story for you about two young spenders named Tommy and Sue. Their parents let them buy whatever they chose, like video games and designer clothes. As they grew older, they spent all their pay on fancy cars, houses, 2 lattes a day. They lived in the moment, never saving a dime. When they tried to retire, they'd run out of time. Working forever is Tom and Sue's fate, so choose to save now before it's too late. Visit our website to find out more, because a happy ending's worth saving for.
Okay.
Mention that again.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about some very significant issues, and the latest one that you heard a lot about just now is the impact that the very, very small number of people in this country have on what our federal and state governments do. And it's criminal when you stop to think about it, how these people are pouring billions of dollars over the years into buying candidates, and that's what it is. They're actually buying candidates, and the voice of the citizens is unheard.
It's an oligarchy.
Yeah, and it's getting worse, and there are all kinds. There's an economist by the name of Piketty who just has a book out and talking about how we are now going back to the type of government that existed when in the countries that the people who came to America were getting away from. And so the whole idea is, how do we stop it?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can pass laws to restrict it, because then the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, as in McCutcheon and also Citizens United, have destroyed that whole concept. And I don't know.
Well, when they do, it's a 5-4 vote, so it's really, even at the Supreme Court level, very controversial.
And it's
apparently.
political.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's very political, even at the Supreme Court level. But, it's one of the issues with Governor Corbett. It's well known that the natural gas industry contributed heavily to his campaign, and I haven't gone in this round, but I assume the same thing here. And, of course, they've benefited. I mean, they don't pay near the taxes they pay Pennsylvania at other states. I mean, so their investment, and they view it as an investment, I'm sure, if they can get someone to say, hey, I'm not going to tax you.
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they do it?
Okay, well, I know we have a ton of things to discuss, and I wish we had more time to get into some of the nitty-gritty here, but I want to mention how important it is to vote. And we said this time and time again. Next Monday, the 21st of April, is the last day for anyone who has not voted to vote, to register. You can get a form from the post office. You can, I don't know if there's one online.
Yeah, you can download it online.
Go online, blaircode.com.
No,
.org.
I don't know. I have a link, so I forget.
What, you can try. Type in blaircode.com or.
I was going to say whenever we do the YouTube, I'll put the links up along with the comments.
And make sure if you're not registered to vote, go out and do it. Now, the big election, of course, is the 20th of May, which is a Tuesday, and unfortunately, our Democratic Party does not have a lot of candidates for a lot of reasons, but we do have somebody running against Bill Schuster, who's a Democrat, Elena Hartsock, and she will be on the ballot, and she's unopposed, so therefore vote, get out and vote and show you we support her. There are 4 candidates for governor, and most of you know McCord, Wolf, McGinty, and Schwartz. If you don't know anything about them, get on the websites that they have, type their name in, you'll come up with information about them. The thing that I want to impress upon our people in Blair County, we have 27,000 registered Democrats, and we all know that. But our turnout has been horrific. And particularly in an election like right now, in the primary, we only have one office that we have a viable candidate who's going to oppose an incumbent. We have nobody running against McGinnis. We have nobody run for a Stern seat. But the point is, let's get out on the 20th of May and show the people of Blair County that Democrats care. Get out there and pick your governor candidate and your lieutenant governor candidate. Now, the lieutenant governor candidates, there are 5 of them that are left in the race. Names like Newman and Stark and Smith and Kaplinski. And you just have to get into, because we don't have the time to really go into the platforms of all these people. We've invited several of them here to come to Blair County, but when you look at Blair County's history of voting, we don't very often get a significant number of people out. So get out there and vote, because we need it. We really, truly need it. And Corbett, George mentioned Corbett. We've got to get rid of the sitting governor because of his policies. I mean, he's been a total disaster.
He's done 4 years of damage.
And some of the things we mentioned, George mentioned the Marcellus shale funding, taxation thing, what he's done to education, wanting to sell or bid out the lottery to a company from England. I mean, you mean there's nobody in the United States that could do it?
Failure to accept the expanded Medicaid expansion that's free. The federal government's paying for it.
Costing us almost $1 billion a year by turning us back. And not only that, not only losing the money, but there are at least 500,000 Pennsylvanians who will now no longer be able to get the coverage under the expanded Affordable Care Act. And that's criminal. And the fact that he wanted to try, and he's still trying to privatize the liquor store business. I mean, the guy has been a disaster for the average American and the average Pennsylvanian, and I appeal to our audience. Make sure you understand that the existing governor and the legislature, which is controlled by that same party, don't have our interests at heart. We have Eichelberger wanting to destroy unions. I mean, where are we going? This whole thing, minimum wage, the average American says we should have a minimum wage. Why don't we have one in Pennsylvania that's higher than $7.45?
There's not one Republican that I know of that's for raising the minimum wage in this area. There's not one.
And how do we encourage people to vote? I mean, that's my
dilemma.
and
this idea that money buys everything, I think really it may be true because people are lazy. But you certainly have the ability to investigate, like you're saying, all of these candidates. It takes a little time. You go on the internet, you look. I wouldn't recommend going in the Altoona Mirror and getting your information because, first of all, they don't really have much in depth. And when they do have anything in depth, it's pretty predictable which slant. There's some angles to any story, and you know the Altoona Mirror's angle is going to be the conservative angle. So anyone who thinks they're getting informed information by reading the Altoona Mirror and watching the TV are sadly mistaken.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of people don't have computers and don't have smartphones, but certainly many of us have relatives, particularly the younger folks. My grandkids, I mean, they're amazing. Even my 8-year-old grandson, I mean, he puts me to sleep on the things he can do in these newfangled iPads and iPhones and the computer. But every one of us has someone that we can call and say, look, would you mind getting me information?
Or the public library.
Or the public library. Go into the public library. They have all kinds of...
That's paid for by taxes.
Computers in there. But you don't...
Decreasing taxes, I might add.
Yeah. But you can find somebody that you know, a friend, a family member, and just ask them if you want to find out what Koplinski's position is as lieutenant governor candidate. They can type up the name and get the information for you. It's not like years ago that you had to almost go out of your way to find information. It's available to anybody who wants to get it.
Well, and I'm always amazed how these people that don't seem to know anything manage to get these weird emails that, to me, I read them and they're obviously false. Yeah. And they never bother to. They're getting the email, so I don't know how they have internet access, but then that's where they stop. They just read something that someone sends to them.
You know,
completely
and like that commercial.
Ridiculous things.
And like that commercial. It's on the internet. It's true.
Yeah. See, we talked about that last night at a little session we had about voting and so on. And sure, the internet is a source of a lot of information, but it's also the source of a lot of misinformation, biased information, and sometimes absolutely dangerous information.
Absolutely.
And people tend to get what they already believe, so it sort of like reinforces what they already believe. Yeah. And a lot of people don't have the ability to like look outside what they think the thing is.
That's excuse me. That's important because there is a concept out there that now that is called fudding, F-U-D-I-N-G. That means that people are trying to get people to do things to support them by fear, uncertainty and doubt. And if you keep hearing things, like with the Affordable Care Act, which they've called Obamacare, all you've heard from the other side from the day one is it's rotten, it's terrible, it's a job destroyer, it's expensive, and yet that's all wrong. Yeah. But we keep hearing it, so people are fearful. The Office of Budget and Management just came out the other day with an article. It was in the New York Times, and God forbid, you tell these people you read the New York Times, they look at you like, "Oh, are you bad?" But in that paper, and it's been on the news media too, that the projection by the OMB is that the cost of the Affordable Care Act is continuing to diminish because of the fact that people are now signing up and getting into it. And yet all we hear is it's going to cause crippling.
Well, yeah, we'll find out because right before the November elections, I guess insurance companies are going to release the rates for next year. And let's hope for the Republicans' sake that they go up double because that's what the Republicans keep talking about.
That's right.
But it's not, the facts on the ground are opposite that.
Yeah, because go ahead.
Here again, it's going to be till 2017 till they could actually do anything. So you're going to have from now until 2017 that all these more people are going to have insurance. And what are they going to do? Kick them all off then?
Yeah. See, that's the thing, because right now the big things about Obamacare, and we should say the Affordable Care Act, because for whatever reason these people on the other side are so fixated on that guy in the White House that they've lost all sense of reason. But the thing is, people with pre-existing conditions are now covered. People who are going to college and don't have a job yet, up at the age 26, they can stay at home. And what's the third biggest one? My mind goes blank.
Pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing conditions, students.
Well, lifetime caps.
No lifetime caps, And the thing is, if somebody would try to avoid the ACA, all these people would be back off the rolls again. And
well, right, and Bill Schuster, as he's voted how many times against Obamacare? He knew right from the beginning.
42 originally.
42. Yeah. Now he's
well, what's his substitute? You never hear he should spend a little bit of his time telling us, well, what he's going to do once he gets rid of Obamacare.
In this area, he doesn't have to. That's the tragedy.
Yeah.
That's
Very shallow thinking some people have.
He doesn't have to.
Well, see, that's the whole thing.
You know, and many of these people were covered, admittedly, under the old system, but it wasn't efficient. I mean, if you got sick enough, you'd go to the hospital and we'd all pay for it.
That's right.
We paid for it by increased insurance that we paid to cover these people that would show up at the emergency room.
Exactly. Just like you do in car insurance. You pay for the uninsured driver. You pay for the uninsured.
And the hospital would get reimbursed out of government money, a thing called disproportionate care, which, by the way, Obamacare eliminates. And so I find it very interesting.
The point you made about the alternative, people should say, well, what's your alternative? You know, we're one of the very few industrial nations that does not have government-sponsored full health care for every person that lives in their country.
Medicare for all.
We're supposed to be the greatest country in the world. Now, they say we have the best health care plan in the world if you can afford it. That's the issue. If you want this coverage for everybody in your family for all types of
In my
problems.
view, it's only making the insurance companies do the moral thing. Like no lifetime caps, like cover pre-existing conditions.
To spend at least 80 cents out of every dollar they collect on health care.
On health care, exactly.
Not on bonuses to the employees of
for
the
denying
insurance
coverage.
companies.
So the issue is, let's refocus instead of how much money they can make on the sick and the ill and the downtrodden, and let's focus on their care, the health, safety, and welfare of Americans. That's what we were looking at. Not how much these people can, like, look at UPMC, the kind of money they make and the kind of money they pay to their executives. It's criminal when you stop and think there are people dying on the streets because they don't have care. I'm getting the signal. We're down to a minute, I guess, a minute and a half at the most. You know, the issues are very important, folks, and we want you to help us elect people who are going to turn the tide away from the selfish people who put greed and monetary advancement above the health, safety, and welfare of the people. Absolutely. And I think we all here stand and sit combined and committed to making sure that we present to you the facts and ask you to vote Democrat, because when you do, you vote for yourself and you vote for a better Pennsylvania and a better America. And with that, we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.